Just sign here, they told me, but they didn't expect me to read the fine print. What I did left them all in shock. They were about to make me transfer my properties and my house to my children who hadn't visited me in over a year. My name is Helen Martinez, I'm 67 years old, and I'm about to tell you the most painful and yet most liberating story of my life. A story that began with tears of loneliness and ended with tears of recovered dignity. It all started exactly 1 year, 2 months, and 5 days ago. Yes, I keep exact count because it was the last day my children visited me before disappearing from my life like ghosts. It was the day of my husband Robert's funeral. After 42 years of marriage, cancer took him in 6 brutal months. 6 months during which my 3 children, Charles, Patricia, and Michael, witnessed how I became a nurse, caregiver, and finally a widow. 6 months during which I sacrificed my health, my sleep, my social life, everything, to be beside the man I had loved for 4 decades. During those 6 months, my children appeared sporadically. Charles, my eldest at 43, a successful civil engineer, would show up on Sunday afternoons, stay for an hour, ask about Dad without really expecting an answer, and leave with the excuse of family responsibilities. Patricia, 40, a lawyer like I had been, came during the week when it was convenient for her, always in a hurry, always with her phone in hand, always with a crisis at work that forced her to leave early. Michael, the youngest at 37, a doctor who supposedly understood better than anyone what we were going through, was the one who showed up least, always with the excuse of saving lives at the hospital. But I was saving a life. Or trying to. I was trying to save the life of the man who had given me everything, including these 3 children who now saw me as just another obligation on their overloaded calendars. Robert died on a Tuesday morning at 6:47 a.m. I was holding his hand when he drew his last breath. He died in our bed, in the house we had built together, surrounded by the love of a woman who never abandoned him. His last words were, "Helen, take care of yourself. The kids are too busy with their own lives." Even dying, Robert knew what I refused to admit. The funeral was a spectacle. My children arrived dressed in black, with appropriately sad faces, receiving condolences as if they had been the most devoted children in the world. I heard Charles tell a neighbor, "Dad had the best possible care. Mom is a saint." I heard Patricia comment, "It was very difficult for all of us, but especially for Mom. Now we have to take very good care of her." And Michael, my baby, my doctor, told my sister, "Mom has been so strong. Now we're going to make sure she's not alone." Lies. All pious lies told to look good in front of others, because after the funeral, after the guests left, after we picked up the wilted flowers and washed the dishes, after the house was plunged into the most absolute silence I had known in 42 years, my children left. And they didn't come back. The first weeks were the hardest. Every morning I woke up expecting to hear Robert's voice asking if I wanted coffee. Every night I went to sleep on one side of the bed, leaving his place intact. The house, which used to buzz with life, now creaked under the weight of loneliness. I called Charles the first week. "Hi, son," I said, trying to sound cheerful. "How are the kids?" "Oh, Mom. They're fine. Listen, I'm in a very important meeting. Can I call you back?" He never called back. I called Patricia 2 days later. "Honey, I was thinking maybe you could come for lunch on Sunday. I could make your favorite roast chicken." "Mom, Sundays are very difficult for me. I have to prepare the week's cases. Plus, the kids have activities. We'll talk soon, okay?" We never talk soon. I called Michael that same week. "Miguelito, how are you? I haven't heard from you in a while." "Mom, I'm at the hospital. There's an emergency. I'll call you later." He never called later. That's how the weeks passed. My calls became less frequent, and their responses more curt. Gradually, I stopped calling because I couldn't bear any more pain from rejection disguised as being busy. The first months were a hell of loneliness. I would get up at 5 a.m. because I couldn't sleep, prepare coffee for 2 out of habit, and then realize that Robert wasn't there to share it. I had breakfast alone, lunch alone, dinner alone. Television became my constant companion, not because I liked the programs, but because I needed to hear human voices. I would go to the supermarket and see other women my age with their children, with their grandchildren, laughing, talking, and I would feel a pang of envy so sharp that sometimes I had to run out to avoid crying in public. What had I done wrong? How had I failed as a mother for my children to abandon me at the moment I needed them most? I stopped dressing up. What for? No one would see me. I stopped cooking elaborate meals. What for? No one would share them with me. I stopped decorating the house for holidays. What for? No one would come to celebrate. At Christmas, I waited until the last minute thinking that one of my children would call to invite me to celebrate. Nothing. I spent Christmas Eve watching Christmas movies on television, eating a frozen dinner, crying every time a scene of a family reunion appeared. On Christmas Day the phone rang. My heart jumped with hope. It was Charles. Hi Mom, Merry Christmas. How are you? Fine. Son. Fine. Ilid. How are you celebrating? Oh, we're at the in-laws' house. Maria insisted we come here this year. The kids are very happy with their gifts. That's good, I said, swallowing the bitterness. What about Patricia and Michael? Each one is with their families. Listen, Mom, I have to go. The kids want me to play with them. Of course, son. Have a good time. You too, Mom. We'll talk soon. I hung up the phone and cried for 2 hours. My grandchildren were playing with their gifts, but they didn't have gifts from their grandmother because no one had told me where they would be. My children were with their in-laws, but their mother was spending Christmas alone for the first time in 67 years. The months continued like this. Forgotten birthdays, lonely holidays, infinite Sundays. I developed routines to survive. Monday cleaning, Tuesday shopping, Wednesday gardening, Thursday reading, Friday cooking for the week, Saturday laundry, Sunday nothing. Sundays were the worst because they were the days when families got together, and I had no family. I started talking to myself. At first I was embarrassed, but gradually it became my way of maintaining sanity. I would talk to Robert as if he were there. I would tell him about my day, about the weather, about the news. Sometimes I would reproach him for leaving me alone. Sometimes I would thank him for the years we had together, but what I told him most was, Robert, how could we have raised such ungrateful children? Where did we go wrong? The answer came when I found a box of old photos in the attic. There were all the memories. Charles taking his first steps while Robert and I cheered him on, Patricia at her high school graduation with us crying with pride, Michael in his doctor's coat the day he graduated, hugging us and telling us we were the best parents in the world. What had happened to those children? When had they become such cold adults? The answer was painful but simple. They had become successful adults, with busy lives, who saw their parents as more of an obligation than a blessing. They had inherited Robert's work ethic, but had lost his ability to love unconditionally. They had learned to be successful in the world, but had forgotten how to be human at home. During that year of abandonment, I lost 15 pounds. Not from dieting, but from sadness. There were days when I simply didn't feel like eating. I developed chronic insomnia. Nights were the worst because there were no distractions, just the crushing weight of loneliness. But something else began to grow inside me. Rage. A slow, burning rage that grew every day that passed without a call, without a visit, without even a text message. Rage for having sacrificed my youth raising these children. Rage for having worked double shifts to pay for their college. Rage for having canceled my own dreams to support theirs. And above all, rage for having believed that a mother's love was enough to guarantee children's love. It was on my 67th birthday when I hit rock bottom. None of my children called me. None. I spent the day waiting, looking at the phone, making excuses for them. Maybe they're planning a surprise. Maybe they're going to come tonight. Maybe they're very busy, but they'll call me tomorrow. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. That night, alone in my house, with a cake I had bought for myself and hadn't even tasted, I had a revelation. It was as if Robert were there, whispering in my ear. Helen, stop waiting for them to love you. Start demanding that they respect you. It was that day that I decided that if my children didn't want me as a mother, then I didn't need them as children. It was that day that I began planning my revenge, because there was one thing my children had forgotten in their rush to abandon me. I owned properties worth more than $5 million. They knew this, of course. But they thought those properties belonged to them automatically for being my children. They thought they could ignore me for years, and then show up for the funeral to claim their inheritance. They were about to learn they were terribly wrong. After my lonely birthday, something fundamentally changed in me. Sadness transformed into determination. Self-pity became self-protection. and blind hope turned into calculated strategy. I started going out more. Not because I felt better, but because I needed to distract myself from planning what was to come. That's how I ended up at the Little Hearts Foundation Volunteer Center, an organization that helped orphan children. The first time I walked in there, it was as if the universe was giving me a cruel lesson in irony. Here were dozens of children who had no parents, but who overflowed with love and gratitude toward any adult who paid attention to them. While I, who had 3 adult children, was treated as if I were invisible. Maria Gonzalez, the foundation's director, received me with a smile I hadn't seen in months. "Mrs. Martinez, what a pleasure to have you here. We've heard a lot about you." "Really?" I asked, surprised. "Of course. Your late husband Robert used to come here often. He always talked about his wife, the strongest woman he had ever known. He said you had been a nurse, legal assistant, mother, and that you could do anything." I felt tears burning my eyes. Robert had been coming here and I didn't know it. Even in his last years, when he was already sick, he had found time to help these children, while our own children were too busy to visit us. Can I help with something?" I asked. "Mrs. Martinez, these children need what you can offer them more than anything in the world: time, attention, and unconditional love." I started going 3 times a week. Mondays I helped with homework. Wednesdays I participated in recreational activities. Fridays I read them stories. At first I did it as a distraction, but gradually I realized that these children were healing me in ways I hadn't imagined. Sophia, 8 years old, became my shadow every time I arrived. "Grandma Helen," she would say, "can you help me with my math homework?" I had never been a grandmother to anyone because my children rarely let me see my grandchildren. Javier, 12 years old, told me about his dreams of being a doctor. "Like Mr. Robert," he would tell me. He told me that if I studied hard, I could help many people. Camila, 10 years old, gave me drawings she made especially for me. "So you don't feel alone in your house," she would tell me with wisdom that broke my heart. These children who had nothing gave me everything, while my children, who had everything, gave me nothing. It was during those months of volunteering that I began to develop my plan, because there was something my children didn't know. During my 40 years as a legal assistant, I had learned more about inheritance laws, contracts, and legal manipulation than many lawyers. I had seen how families were destroyed by money, how ambitious children deceived vulnerable parents, and how the legal system could be used both to protect and to exploit. I contacted my former boss, Attorney Ramirez, who was now 78 years old but still active in special cases. "Helen," he said when I explained my situation, "what you're telling me is more common than you imagine. I see cases like this every week. Children who disappear when parents are healthy and magically appear when it smells like inheritance. What can I do?" I asked. "Well, technically, you can do whatever you want with your money, but I suggest you think carefully about the consequences. It's one thing to punish your children, another to destroy the relationship forever." "Attorney, the relationship is already destroyed. They destroyed it a year ago." "Then," he said with a smile I recognized from our days working together, "let's give them a lesson they'll never forget." We spent weeks designing the perfect strategy. First, we did a complete inventory of my properties. The main house valued at $1.2 million, 2 commercial lots valued at $800,000 each, and a savings account with $200,000. Total, $3 million. Second, we created a new will with very specific clauses. My children would inherit everything, but only if they met certain filial care requirements over the next 5 years. If they didn't comply, everything would go to the foundation. Third, and this was the most brilliant part of the plan, we created a set of fake documents that seemed to transfer my properties to my children, but actually included clauses that would declare me mentally incompetent and give them power to place me in a nursing home. Why would I do this? Because I wanted to see how far they were capable of going for money. I wanted to see if they would really try to strip me of my freedom and dignity just to speed up their inheritance. Fourth, I sold 2 of my smaller properties for $800,000 without telling anyone. $500,000 went to the foundation as an anonymous donation. The other $300,000 I kept in a secret account. Fifth, I applied for a $500,000 loan using the remaining properties as collateral. This would create a debt that if my children signed papers making themselves responsible for my properties, they would also inherit. The plan was perfect. If my children came only for money, they would fall into the trap. If they came for genuine love, then we could rebuild our relationship. It was a definitive test of their intentions, but for the plan to work, I needed them to come visit me. And for that, I needed to create a sense of urgency. I called Charles on a Tuesday afternoon. "Son," I said, making my voice sound more fragile than it was, "I need to talk to you. I've been thinking a lot about the future, and I think it's time we made some arrangements." "What kind of arrangements, Mom?" "Well, about the properties, the will, those things. I'm not getting any younger, and if something happens to me..." There was silence then. "Mom, are you feeling okay? Are you sick?" "No, I'm not sick. But I'm already 67 years old. And after what happened with your father, I realized that you never know when." "Mom, don't talk like that. You're going to live many more years." "I hope so, son. But I still think we should talk. Could you come this weekend? Maybe you could bring Patricia and Michael too." "Yes, sure. Let me talk to them and we'll coordinate something." After hanging up, I waited. 2 hours later, my phone rang. It was Patricia. "Mom, Charles told me you wanted to talk to us about legal matters." "Yes, honey. I think it's important that we arrange some things." "Are you okay? Do you have health problems?" "No, I'm fine. I just want to make sure everything is in order." "What kind of things do you want to arrange?" "Well, the will, the properties, who would take care of everything if something happened to me." "Mom, have you thought about simplifying things? I mean, managing all those properties must be very complicated for you." There it was. The first sign of what they were really interested in. "Yes, honey, sometimes I think about that. That's why I want to talk to you. What do you think if all 3 of us come this Saturday? We can have lunch together and then talk." "That sounds perfect." When Michael called me that same night, I already knew exactly what he was going to say. "Mom, my siblings told me you wanted to talk to us about inheritance matters." "Yes, sweetie. I think it's time we made some important decisions." "Decisions about what?" "About what will happen to everything your father and I worked so hard to get." "Mom, is someone pressuring you to do something? Is someone bothering you?" "No, Michael. I simply think it's time for you to take charge of these responsibilities. Do you feel capable of handling all that alone?" "Well, sometimes it's a lot of work." "Mom, don't worry. We're going to take care of everything." And there was the second sign. My children, who had been too busy to visit me for a year, suddenly were very interested in taking care of everything. Saturday arrived and, for the first time in 365 days, my 3 children appeared at my door at the same time. Charles arrived in his black BMW, Patricia in her white Mercedes, and Michael in his gray Audi. Expensive cars paid for with the careers Robert and I had financed. I received them with a smile I had practiced in the mirror all week. A smile that seemed like a loving mother, but was actually a hunter waiting for her prey to fall into the trap. "What a pleasure to see you all together," I exclaimed, hugging them as if I were the happiest mother in the world. "Hi, Mom," they said almost in unison, with kisses on the cheek that felt as fake as their smiles. "Comein, comein. I made your favorite lunch." While we were eating lunch, I watched them carefully. Charles checked his phone every few minutes. Patricia seemed impatient, as if she had more important things to do. Michael ate quickly, as if he wanted to finish soon. None of them asked me how I had been during the last year. None of them asked me how I felt living alone. None of them asked me if I needed anything. They only talked about their jobs, their successes, their problems. I was simply the audience for their egocentric monologues. After lunch, Charles cleared his throat. "Well, Mom, you said you wanted to talk about some important matters." "Yes," I said, getting serious. "I've been thinking a lot about the future." "What have you thought?" Patricia asked. "Well, managing all these properties is becoming very complicated for me. The taxes, maintenance, repairs. It's a lot of work." "You're right," Michael said. "It's a lot for one person alone. So I thought maybe you could help me. Maybe you could take care of everything." The 3 of them exchanged glances. I could see the excitement in their eyes, although they tried to hide it. "What exactly do you have in mind?" Charles asked. "Well, I don't know much about legal matters. I thought maybe you could find the best way to transfer the responsibilities." "Transfer the responsibilities?" Patricia repeated. "Yes. For you to take charge of everything. That way I wouldn't have to worry about anything. Mom, Michael said. That's a very important decision. Are you sure that's what you want? Yes, sweetie. I think it's best for everyone. Well, Charles said, we could consult with some lawyers and see what's the best way to do this. How long would it take you? I asked. About 2 weeks, Patricia answered. We have to prepare all the documents correctly. Perfect, I said. Meanwhile, I'll stay here peacefully without worrying about anything. They left that afternoon with promises to return soon with the perfect solution. I watched them drive away in their expensive cars and smiled. The trap was set. Now I just had to wait for them to fall into it. During the next 2 weeks, my phone rang more times than in the entire previous year. My children called me constantly, asking how I was, if I needed anything, if I felt well. How curious. When there was no money involved, they had no time to call me. But now that they thought they were about to inherit $3 million, suddenly they had all the time in the world. Each call confirmed what I already knew. My children didn't love me. They loved my money, and I was about to prove it to them in the most cruel and educational way possible. Exactly 2 weeks later, my 3 children appeared at my door again. This time they arrived together, in the same car, as if they had been planning their strategy during the trip. Charles carried a black leather briefcase. Patricia had a thick folder under her arm. Michael carried a paper bag with what looked like pastries from an expensive bakery. Hi, Mom, they greeted me, with those smiles I had already learned to recognize as completely fake. What a surprise, I exclaimed, acting as if I hadn't been waiting for them all week. To what do I owe this visit? Mom, Charles said. We've been working on what you asked us. We have the perfect solution for all your problems. Really? I asked, opening my eyes wide as if I were a naive old woman. What did you find? Can we sit down? Patricia asked. It's a bit complicated to explain. I led them to the living room, where they settled on the same sofa where they had grown up playing, fighting, and planning their futures. Now they were there to plan my destruction. Michael put the pastries on the table. We brought your favorites, Mom. The chocolate ones with cream. How thoughtful, I said, although I knew perfectly well that these pastries were a bribe. An attempt to put me in a good mood before asking me to sign my death sentence. Charles opened his briefcase and took out a pile of documents. Mom, we've consulted with the best lawyers in the city. We've found the perfect way to simplify your life. Yes, I said, sitting on the edge of my chair as if I were anxious to hear. Yes, Patricia continued, opening her folder. Basically, what we'll do is transfer all the properties to our names. That way we'll take care of all the paperwork, taxes, repairs, everything. And what would I do? I asked. You wouldn't have to do anything, Michael said. You would continue living here, of course. Nothing would change for you. But we would take care of all the administrative part. And if I wanted to sell some property? I asked. Well, Charles said, we would have to consult among all of us. But I don't think it's necessary. These properties are a good investment. And if I wanted to move somewhere else, why would you want to move? Patricia asked. This is your home. Here you have all your memories. And if I get sick and need special care? Don't worry about that, Michael said. We would take care of finding the best medical attention for you. Each answer confirmed what I already knew. Once I signed these documents, I would have no control over anything. Not over my properties, not over my money, not over my life. It sounds very complicated, I said, making my voice sound uncertain. No, Mom, on the contrary, they hurried to say. It's very simple. You just have to sign here. Charles pointed to a line at the end of a document. And we take care of everything else. Don't I need to read the documents? I asked. Well, if you want, Patricia said. But it's pure legal language. Very boring and confusing. We already took care of reviewing everything with the lawyers. Yes, Mom, Michael added. It's not worth stressing yourself reading all those pages full of complicated legal terms. Besides, Charles said, extending a gold pen toward me, the sooner we sign, the sooner we can start helping you. We've already wasted a lot of time. I took the documents in my hands, pretending they trembled slightly with age. Are you sure this is for the best? Absolutely, the 3 said in unison. Well, I said, then let me read a little bit, just to understand what it's about. I saw how they immediately became tense. Charles moved restlessly in his seat. Patricia began checking her phone. Michael got up to get water. Mom, Charles said. It's really not necessary. They're standard documents. Just a quick look, I insisted, opening the first page. And there began my most brilliant performance. Because there was something my children never knew about me. During 40 years as a legal assistant, I had not only learned to identify legal traps, but I had developed a reading speed that allowed me to analyze complex documents in minutes. My eyes moved quickly through each line, each paragraph, each clause. And what I saw exceeded even my worst expectations. It wasn't just about a property transfer. It was a complete document to strip me of all my basic human rights. On page 3, I found the first bomb. The signatory acknowledges and declares that due to her advanced age and the natural deterioration of her mental faculties, she requires assistance in making important decisions related to her personal and financial well-being. On page 7, the designated guardians will have exclusive authority to determine the most appropriate place of residence for the physical and mental well-being of the ward. On page 12, the ward renounces her right to appeal any decision made by the designated guardians, recognizing that she lacks the necessary mental capacity to adequately evaluate her own situation. On page 15, the guardians are authorized to dispose of all the ward's assets in the manner they consider most convenient, without need for prior consultation or consent. And the clause that took my breath away was on page 18, in microscopic print. In case the ward presents resistance or disagreement with the guardian's decisions, this will be considered as additional evidence of mental deterioration, and the guardians are authorized to seek immediate institutionalization in the care facility they consider appropriate. It was a document designed by psychopaths. Not only would they steal my properties, but if I protested, that would be used as proof that I was crazy and they would lock me up in a mental institution. But there was more. On page 23 I found something I didn't expect. A clause that established that if I died within the first 5 years after signing, my children would receive a life insurance bonus equivalent to double the value of the properties. A bonus if I died soon? What kind of children draft a document that benefits them if their mother dies quickly? I kept reading, maintaining my neutral expression, although inside I felt a mixture of horror and rage I had never experienced. On page 28, the ward accepts a medication plan supervised by the guardians, including sedatives and mood stabilizers as necessary to maintain cooperation and well-being. Forced medication? Sedatives? To maintain my cooperation? On page 31, any attempt by the ward to contact legal authorities, social services, or any third party to dispute this agreement will be considered as evidence of senile paranoia and will result in immediate communication restrictions. If I tried to ask for help, that would be senile paranoia, and they would cut off all my communication with the outside world. On page 35, the final clause. The guardians commit to providing basic care to the ward until her natural death, with the understanding that any artificial extension of life through extraordinary medical measures remains at their exclusive discretion. Basic care until natural death. Without extraordinary measures if I got seriously ill. In other words, they would let me die. It was the perfect plan for legal murder. They would strip me of my rights, drug me to keep me docile, lock me up if I protested, and let me die if I got sick. All completely legal once I signed. I looked up at my 3 children who were watching me with poorly disguised impatience. In their eyes I no longer saw the children I had raised with love. I saw 3 strangers who had meticulously planned my destruction. There are some things here I don't understand, I finally said, keeping my voice calm. What things, Mom? Charles asked, with a tone that tried to be patient but sounded irritated. Well, for starters, according to Clause 15b, you're declaring me mentally incapable. And according to Clause 23a, you reserve the right to determine where I live. The silence that followed was deafening. Patricia was the first to attempt an explanation. Mom, you're misinterpreting the legal language. No, Patricia, I interrupted her. I worked in law for 40 years. I know exactly what these clauses mean. Michael tried a different approach. Mom, we would never use those clauses. They're there just as a formality. Then you won't mind if we eliminate them before signing, I replied. Carlos stood up abruptly. Enough. Mom, either you sign now or we leave and never come back. Like you've done for the last year? I asked them. It was then that I decided to do something that would leave them in shock forever. I got up, walked to my desk, and took out my own set of documents that I had prepared that same morning. After suspecting that something like this might happen, it turns out I also have some papers for you to sign. I told them. What are you talking about? Charles asked. Well, since you're so worried about my well-being and want to take care of my properties, I thought it would be fair for you to also take care of some of my debts. I handed them my documents. These are the papers for a $500,000 loan I took last week, using the properties as collateral. If you're going to be responsible for my assets, you'll also be responsible for my debts. That's impossible. Patricia shouted. You can't have done that. Of course I could. I smiled. According to your own documents, I'm still mentally capable of making financial decisions until the moment of signing. And I decided I needed that money for house renovations. Where is that money? Michael asked, pale. That's the interesting part, I said, enjoying every second of their horrified faces. I donated it all to the Orphan Children's Foundation, where I've been volunteering since you stopped visiting me. You're crazy, Charles shouted. We'll sue to recover that money. You can try, I said calmly. But according to the law, a mentally capable person has the right to dispose of her money as she likes. And if you sign those documents declaring me incapable, you would be admitting that you knew about my mental incapacity, but allowed me to take a $500,000 loan. That would make you accomplices to bank fraud. The silence that followed was absolute. I could see how their minds worked frantically, trying to find a way out of the trap I had set for them. But if we don't sign, Patricia said slowly, and you don't sign our documents either, what happens? Then, I said, I'll continue being the owner of my properties, and you'll continue being responsible for visiting me regularly to prove that you really care about my well-being. Because, you see, I also made some changes to my will. I took out another document. This is my new will. It says that my properties will be divided equally among my 3 children, but only if they prove that they really care about me for the next 5 years. This means regular visits, phone calls, and genuine participation in my life. And if we don't comply? Michael asked, although I think he already knew the answer. Then everything goes to the Orphan Children's Foundation, I said simply. They have given me more love and companionship in the last 12 months than you have in the last 12 years. Charles headed toward the door. This is emotional blackmail. No, I told him. This is conditional love. You loved me only for my money. Now I love you only if you prove that you really care about me. Patricia began to cry. Mom, we love you. Really? I asked her. When was the last time you called me just to ask how I was? When was the last time you came to visit me without a hidden agenda? She couldn't answer. You have a choice, I continued. You can leave right now and wait for me to die to inherit nothing. Or you can start being my children again. Truly my children. Not my heirs, but my children. Michael approached me. Mom, I didn't know you felt so lonely. You knew it, I told him softly. You all knew it. You just didn't care enough to do something about it. Did you really donate $500,000? Charles asked, still incredulous. Every penny, I confirmed. And it was the best investment I've made in my life. Seeing those children's faces when we told them they could build a new library and computer center. That was worth more than all the money in the world. But how are you going to pay the loan? Patricia asked. Well, I smiled. That's the part you don't know. 6 months ago, when I realized you weren't coming back, I decided to do something productive with my time. I contacted a real estate agent and put 2 of my smaller properties up for sale. I sold them for $800,000. Their eyes opened wide. So technically, the $500,000 loan is covered. I have $300,000 left to live comfortably. And I still have this house and the main lot, which is worth about $1.2 million more. Why didn't you tell us? Michael asked. Because I needed to know if you would visit me for love or for money. Now I know. Charles slumped onto the sofa, his head in his hands. Mom, we made a terrible mistake. Yes, I nodded. You did. But mistakes can be corrected. Relationships can be repaired. Love can be rebuilt. But only if you really want it. Patricia approached and hugged me. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm really sorry. Me too, said Michael, joining the hug. Charles stayed apart for a moment, but finally approached. "Mom, can you forgive us? I already forgave you," I told them. But forgiving doesn't mean forgetting. It means giving a second chance. "What are the rules?" Charles asked. "They're simple," I replied. "One visit per week each. One phone call every 2 days. And genuine participation in my life. I want to know my grandchildren. I want to be part of your lives. I want to be your mother, not just your future inheritance." "And if we comply?" Patricia asked. "Then when the time comes, you'll inherit everything I have. But more importantly, you'll have recovered your mother, and I'll have recovered my children." "And if we don't comply?" Michael asked. "Then the Orphan Children's Foundation will become one of the richest charitable organizations in the country," I said with a smile. "And you'll have lost more than money. You'll have lost the opportunity to truly know the woman who brought you into the world." That day, my children left with much to think about. They had come expecting to trick a lonely old woman, but found a woman who had learned to value herself enough to demand respect and genuine love. 3 days later, Michael was the first to call. Not to talk about money or properties, but to ask me how my day had been. Patricia came on Saturday with her children, my grandchildren, whom I barely knew. Charles took a week longer, but finally showed up with flowers and a sincere apology. 6 months have passed since that day. My children visit me regularly, call me frequently, and for the first time in years, I feel like I'm really their mother. Not because they have something to gain, but because they've rediscovered the value of having a mother who loves them. As for the documents they wanted me to sign, I burned them in the fireplace while my children watched. The ashes were carried away by the wind, along with the version of us that I never want to see again. That night I couldn't sleep. Not from sadness, but from a strange feeling of energy I hadn't felt in months. It was as if I had been carrying an enormous weight without realizing it. And suddenly it had been lifted from me. I stayed awake all night, going over every detail of what had happened, every lie they had told, every manipulation they had attempted, every veiled threat they had made. But above all, I thought about something that had surprised me throughout the confrontation. I hadn't felt like a victim. I had felt like a fighter. For a year I had cried for my children, had made excuses for their absence, had blamed their jobs, their families, everything except the obvious, that they simply didn't care enough to make the effort. But now I had definitive proof of what they really thought of me. And strangely, that clarity was liberating. At 6 a.m., I called Attorney Ramirez. "Helen," he said, "how did it go yesterday? Did they fall into the trap?" "They fell completely," I replied. "And it was worse than I imagined." I told him every detail of the documents they had brought, every clause, every implicit threat. "My God," he said when I finished. "Helen, those documents are monstrous. That's not a property transfer, it's legal slavery." "I know. And what hurts me most is that they looked me in the eyes and told me it was for my own good." "What do you want to do now?" "I want to implement the second part of the plan." "Are you sure?" "Once you do this, there's no going back." "Attorney, after what I saw yesterday, there's no going back anyway." "Very well. Give me 2 days to prepare everything." 2 days later, Attorney Ramirez arrived at my house with a smile I hadn't seen in years. "Helen," he said, "this is going to be epic." We had prepared a plan that was a masterpiece of poetic justice. If my children wanted to play dirty, I was going to teach them how to really play dirty. First, we made public the $500,000 loan I had taken using the properties as collateral. This meant that anyone who inherited the properties would also inherit the debt. Second, I officially donated another $300,000 to the Orphan Children's Foundation, leaving a public record of the transaction. Third, we created a new will that was a work of legal art. My children could inherit the properties, but only after fulfilling certain conditions for 5 years. Weekly visits, regular calls, and genuine participation in my life. If they didn't comply, everything would go to the foundation. But the fourth part was the most brilliant. I decided to make public the documents my children had tried to get me to sign. "Are you sure about this?" the attorney asked me. "This is going to cause a scandal." "I'm sure," I replied. "I want the whole city to know what kind of children I had." We contacted the local newspapers with a story that had all the elements of a perfect drama. Successful children trying to defraud their widowed mother, fraudulent legal documents, and an elderly woman who defends herself with intelligence and determination. The city's main newspaper published the story on the front page. Professional children attempt to legally enslave their widowed mother. The article included photographs of my children, copies of the fraudulent documents, with their names clearly visible, and my complete testimony about their year of abandonment. The story went viral on social media. People were outraged. My children, who had built their professional reputations based on their image as successful and respectable people, suddenly found themselves being pointed out as the most despicable villains in the city. Charles lost 3 important contracts when his clients saw the news. "We can't work with someone who treats his own mother like that," they told him. The law firm where Patricia worked issued a statement distancing themselves from her and her personal actions. Her colleagues began to avoid her, and several clients asked to be assigned other attorneys. Michael suffered the most. The hospital where he worked initiated an ethical investigation. "A doctor who is capable of planning forced medication of his own mother cannot be trusted with patient care," declared the hospital director. But the 5th part of the plan was what satisfied me most. I decided to use the money I had to do something that really mattered. With the $800,000 I had obtained from selling the smaller properties, and another $200,000 from my savings, I established the Helen Martinez Foundation for the Protection of Senior Adults. The foundation offered free legal services for elderly people being exploited by their families, companionship programs for abandoned seniors, and public education about seniors' rights. At the foundation's inauguration, surrounded by dozens of elderly people who had lived stories similar to mine, I gave a speech that the newspaper published in full. For a year I wondered what I had done wrong as a mother for my children to abandon me. Now I realized that the correct question was, what had I done wrong as a person to accept being treated without respect? There's a difference between loving our children and allowing them to destroy us. There's a difference between being a devoted mother and being a voluntary victim. Today I want to tell all the senior adults who are living similar situations, you have the right to be treated with dignity. You have the right to make your own decisions. You have the right to live where you want, to communicate with whom you want, and to say no when someone tries to take advantage of you. Family love doesn't mean sacrificing our dignity. Respect is not optional in human relationships, even with our own children. And if our children can't love us without also respecting us, then maybe it's time to find family elsewhere. The audience gave me a standing ovation that lasted 5 minutes. In the audience I saw faces of women who had lived similar stories, men who had been abandoned by their families, and young people who promised never to treat their parents that way. The following months were an emotional roller coaster. On one hand, I felt more empowered than I had felt in years. The foundation was helping dozens of elderly people. My days were full of purpose, and for the first time in a long time, I felt valuable. On the other hand, I had lost my children definitively and irreversibly. Charles was the first to try to contact me, 2 weeks after the story went public. He called me at 11 p.m., clearly drunk. "Mom," he said, "how could you do this to us?" "Do what to you?" I asked. "Destroy our reputations. Ruin our careers. Expose us publicly." "I didn't destroy anything," I replied calmly. "I only made public the documents you prepared. But you didn't have to do it. We could have resolved this privately." "Resolve what?" "The fact that you planned to enslave me legally. It wasn't slavery. It was help." "Charles, the documents speak for themselves. Everyone can read them. But now the whole city thinks we're monsters. And aren't you?" There was a long silence. "Mom, I'm your son." "No," I told him. "You were my son. Sons don't plan their mother's destruction. So this is definitive? You're never going to forgive me." "Charles, forgiveness requires repentance. And repentance requires recognizing that you did something wrong. So far, you've only complained about the consequences, not about your actions. What do you want me to say?" "I don't want you to say anything. I want you to feel something. I want you to understand that what you did was wrong. Not because you got caught, but because it was wrong." "Mom, did you ever, in this last year, wonder how I was? If I felt lonely? If I needed help? If I simply wanted to talk to my son?" "I was busy. And when you planned to take away all my rights, did you think about how I would feel? About what it would mean for me to lose my independence? We thought it would be better." "No, Charles. You thought it would be more convenient for you. I hung up the phone. He didn't call again. Patricia tried a different approach. She came to my house one afternoon, unannounced, with tears in her eyes. "Mom," she said, "I've lost half my clients. The firm is considering firing me. My reputation is ruined." "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it. "Really?" "Yes. I didn't want your reputation to be ruined. I wanted you to recognize what you had done." "Mom, we made a mistake." "A mistake?" "Yes. We were too aggressive with the documents. But our intentions were good." "Patricia, planning your mother's forced medication isn't a mistake. It's calculated cruelty. We weren't going to use those clauses." "Then why did you include them?" "As a precaution." "Precaution against what?" "Against me exercising my basic human rights." "Mom, we just wanted to protect you." "No, Patricia. You wanted to protect your inheritance." "How can you say that?" "Because for a year you showed no interest in protecting me from loneliness, sadness, or abandonment. You only became interested in protecting me when money was involved." She left crying. She didn't come back either. Michael was the last to try. He arrived with my grandchildren, evidently thinking that their presence would soften me. "Grandma," the children said, "Daddy says you're angry with him." My heart broke. These children weren't to blame for anything, but they were being used as emotional pawns. "I'm not angry," I told them, hugging them. "But Daddy and I have some problems to resolve." "Can you resolve them soon?" asked my 8-year-old granddaughter. "We miss coming to visit you." "I miss you too," I told them, looking at Michael over their heads. After the children went to play in the garden, Michael and I sat down to talk. "Mom," he said, "I know we screwed up." It was the first time any of my children had used those words. "Yes," I told him. "You screwed up. And I know we hurt you." "Yes. And I know there's no excuse for what we did." I stayed quiet, waiting. "Mom, when Dad died, we didn't know how to handle our own grief. So we just ran away. It was easier to avoid you than face the reality that he was gone. And the documents were..." He sighed deeply. "They were Charles's idea. He said it was the most efficient way to handle everything. Patricia drafted the legal language. I just went along. And none of you stopped to think about how I would feel?" "No," he admitted. "We were thinking about money, efficiency, avoiding future legal problems. We weren't thinking about you as a person." It was the first honest admission I had heard from any of my children. "Michael," I said, "that's the difference between a mistake and calculated cruelty. A mistake is something you do without thinking. What you did required weeks of planning." "I know. Do you really know what those documents would have meant for me?" "Yes. They would have meant you were no longer a free person." "And that seemed acceptable to you?" "At the time, yes. We thought it was necessary." "For what?" "To protect the family estate." "From what?" From you making bad decisions." "Like what decisions?" Like marrying someone who only wanted your money. Or being scammed by strangers." "And it didn't occur to you to simply ask me about my plans? Talk to me about your concerns?" "No. We thought it would be simpler to make everything legal and permanent." "Simple for you?" "Yes. Simple for us." We sat in silence for a moment, watching the children play in the garden where their father had played decades before. "Michael," I finally said, "there's something I need you to understand. I'm not angry because you made a mistake. I'm devastated because for an entire year you treated me as if I didn't exist, and then you appeared only when you thought you could benefit from my money." "I understand." "Do you really?" "Because during that year, there were days when I woke up and had no one to talk to. Days when I cooked for 2 out of habit, and then remembered I was alone. Nights when I went to sleep wondering if any of you would care if something happened to me." I saw tears in his eyes. "And you knew I was alone. You knew it was the first time in 42 years that I lived without Robert. You knew I was suffering. But you chose your own lives, your own problems, your own comforts over your mother who needed you." "Mom." "And then, when you finally appeared, it wasn't to apologize for the abandonment. It wasn't to ask how I was. It was to take away the only thing I had left, my independence." "You're right. And when I told you I wanted to read the documents, when I exercised my most basic right to understand what I was signing, you emotionally blackmailed me. You told me I was difficult, that I was irrational, that I was paranoid." "Yes. Do you understand what that means?" It means you not only wanted to steal my money and my freedom, you wanted me to voluntarily participate in my own destruction. You wanted me to sign with a smile. Michael covered his face with his hands. Do you know what the most painful part is? I continued. It's not that you planned to hurt me. It's that you planned it so coldly, so calculatedly, and then looked me in the eyes and told me it was for my own good. Mom, is there any way to fix this? I don't know. I told him honestly. Things have happened that can't be undone. I've seen a part of you that I never thought existed. What if we try to rebuild the relationship from scratch? How can I trust you? I don't know. But I'm willing to do whatever it takes. Michael, I don't even know if that person who's willing to do whatever it takes is real, or if it's just another manipulation because your original plan failed. It was a brutal question but necessary. It's real, he told me. Mom, I've lost patience, I've lost prestige, I've lost the respect of my colleagues. But what hurts me most is knowing that I hurt the woman who gave me life. Does it hurt because you hurt me? Or because there were consequences? Because I hurt you. Even if there had been no public consequences? Yes. I wanted to believe him. With all my heart, I wanted to believe him. But I had learned the hard way that a mother's love wasn't enough to change people. Michael, I said, if you really want to rebuild our relationship, it's going to have to be on my terms. What terms? First, you and your siblings are going to have to make a public statement apologizing and acknowledging that you tried to defraud me. Publicly, yes. Publicly. You destroyed my trust publicly. You're going to have to rebuild it publicly. That will be very difficult for Charles and Patricia. I don't care how difficult it is for them. What else? Second, you're going to have to donate a significant amount of money to the foundation as compensation for the damage you tried to do to me. How much? $100,000 each. Mom, that's a lot of money. It's less than what you would have inherited if you had succeeded with your plan. You're right. Third, you're going to have to commit to regular visits, regular calls, and genuine participation in my life for the next 5 years. And if we do it, then I'll consider the possibility of including you in my will again. Just the possibility. Michael, you destroyed a decades-long relationship in one afternoon. Don't expect to rebuild it in one conversation. He was thoughtful for a moment. What if one of us complies but the others don't? Then that person will be treated individually. You're not responsible for each other. Mom, can I ask you something? Yes. Will you ever be able to forgive us completely? It was the most difficult question he had asked me in a long time. I don't know. I told him honestly. There are things that once you see them, you can't stop seeing them. Now I know what you're capable of when money is involved. That will never change. But is it possible we could have some kind of relationship? It's possible. But it will never be the same relationship we had before. Why? Because before I loved you unconditionally and trusted you completely. Now I'll love you conditionally and trust you gradually. I understand. Do you really? Yes. And I promise I'll do everything in my power to earn back your trust. And your siblings? I can't speak for them. But I'm going to try to convince them. He picked up the children and left, promising to return in a week with an answer. A week later, Michael returned. Alone. What about your siblings? I asked. Charles flatly refused. He says he won't humiliate himself publicly, and that you're a manipulative mother who's emotionally blackmailing them. And Patricia? Patricia is considering it. But she wants to modify the terms. She says the public apology would ruin her professionally forever. I see. Mom, I accept all your terms. All of them. All of them. I'm going to make the public statement. I'm going to donate the $100,000 to the foundation, and I'm going to commit to visiting you regularly. Why? Because I want my children to have a grandmother. Because I want them to know what real family love is, not the kind of conditional love I learned. And because I realized that losing you would be the greatest loss of my life. Even if your siblings don't do it, especially if my siblings don't do it. I'm not going to make the same mistake twice. A week later, Michael published an open letter in the local newspaper. My name is Michael Martinez, and I am one of the 3 children who attempted to legally defraud their mother, Helen Martinez, as reported in this newspaper last month. I want to declare publicly that our mother was right about everything. The documents we prepared were not to help her, but to strip her of her basic rights and take her money. For an entire year, we abandoned our mother at the most difficult time of her life, when she needed us most. Instead of giving her love and support after our father's death, we turned our backs on her. And when we finally appeared in her life, it wasn't to offer her love, but to steal her independence and dignity. My mother raised us with values that we failed to honor. She taught us about love, respect, and family, and we responded with abandonment, manipulation, and betrayal. She had the right to defend herself. She had the right to expose our behavior. She had the right to protect her freedom and dignity. Today I am donating $100,000 to the Helen Martinez Foundation for the protection of senior adults, as a small compensation for the damage I tried to do to the most important woman in my life. I am also publicly committing to being the son she deserves for the rest of her life, regardless of whether my siblings do the same. To my mother, forgive me, not because I deserve it, but because you are big enough to give it. To other children who may be considering mistreating their parents, don't make our mistakes. Parents' love is not infinite when it's not reciprocated with respect. And to other senior adults who may be living similar situations, you have the right to be treated with dignity. Don't let anyone, not even your own children, convince you otherwise. Dr. Michael Martinez. The letter caused a second wave of media attention. This time, the public's reaction was one of surprise and respect. Many people wrote letters to the newspaper praising Michael for his courage in publicly admitting his mistakes. The hospital where he worked issued a statement saying they respected the integrity Dr. Martinez had shown by taking responsibility for his actions, and that his honesty reinforced his credibility as a doctor. Several of his patients told him they respected him more after reading his letter than before. 2 weeks later, Patricia published her own letter, although much shorter and less detailed. As one of the daughters involved in the Martinez case, I want to publicly apologize to my mother for our behavior. I acknowledge that we made serious mistakes, and that she had the right to defend herself. I will be donating $50,000 to her foundation, and hope to be able to rebuild our relationship over time. Patricia Martinez. It was a much less sincere apology than Michael's, clearly designed to minimize damage to her career rather than to genuinely ask for forgiveness. But it was something. Charles never apologized. In fact, he hired a lawyer to sue me for damage to his reputation. The lawsuit was dismissed because all the documents I had made public were real, and he had been one of their authors. But he also did something I didn't expect. He began telling people that I was a manipulative mother who had staged the whole situation to victimize herself and get attention. Some people believed him, especially other people who had mistreated their parents and felt judged by my story. The city was divided into two camps: those who saw me as a heroine who had defended her rights, and those who saw me as a vengeful woman who had destroyed her own family for money. But for me, public opinion no longer mattered as much as before. I had recovered my own voice, my own strength, and my own ability to decide who deserved to be in my life. Michael kept his word. He began visiting me every Sunday without fail. At first our conversations were tense, full of apologies and explanations. But gradually, we began to rebuild something resembling a normal relationship. More importantly for me, he let me be a grandmother to his children. He brought them regularly, and for the first time in years, my house was filled with children's laughter again. Patricia started visiting me once a month. Our conversations remained superficial, but it was progress. I could see she was making a genuine effort, although limited by her own reserved nature. Charles never returned. Occasionally I received news about him through mutual acquaintances. He had lost several important contracts and his marriage was in trouble because his wife was embarrassed by the whole situation. But I had also built a new life, a different life. The Helen Martinez Foundation had become one of the most respected senior adult assistance organizations in the region. We had helped more than 200 people avoid family scams, had connected hundreds of lonely elderly people with companionship programs, and had educated thousands of families about respect for senior adults. My work at the foundation had put me in contact with dozens of people who had become my new chosen family. Maria Gonzalez, the director, had become like a daughter to me. The foundation's children called me Grandma Helen, and included me in all their celebrations. I had met other women my age who had lived similar experiences. We formed a support group that met every week. We jokingly called ourselves the survivors. Rosa had been abandoned by her 4 children after her husband died, and left a considerable inheritance. Carmen had been scammed by her own son, who had forged her signature to sell her house. Dolores had been placed in a nursing home by her daughter, who then sold all her possessions. We had all learned the same painful lesson. Unconditional love toward our children didn't guarantee unconditional love back. But we had also learned something more important. We could create new families based on mutual respect, genuine support, and true love. One afternoon, while I was at the foundation helping Sophia with her math homework, I realized something that surprised me. I was happier now than before Robert died. Not because I didn't miss him. I missed him every day. But I had found a version of myself I didn't know existed. A strong, independent woman who didn't need anyone's approval to validate her own existence. During all those years being a wife and mother, I had defined my worth by how useful I was to others. Now I knew I had value simply for being who I was. Grandma Helen, Sophia said, why don't your children visit you more? It was an innocent question, but it made me reflect on how to explain such a complex situation to an 8-year-old girl. Sophia, I told her, sometimes the people we love don't know how to love us back the way we need. But aren't you sad? Sometimes. But I'm also happy to have a new family here with you and all the other children. Are we your family now? Yes, Sophia. You are my family now. And it was true. This child, who didn't share my blood, gave me more love and respect in one afternoon than my own children had given me in years. 3 years later, today is my 70th birthday. I'm sitting in my house's garden, which is now always full of activity. Michael and his children are here, along with Patricia, who has started bringing her children too. Maria from the foundation came with a homemade cake. Rosa, Carmen, and Dolores are here with their new chosen families. A dozen children from the foundation are running through the garden screaming and laughing. It's the most crowded birthday I've had in years, and also the most genuine. Michael approaches me with a serious expression. Mom, he says, there's something I want to tell you. What? Thank you. For what? For not allowing us to destroy you. For defending yourself when it was necessary. For teaching us that respect is not optional in family relationships. And for giving us the opportunity to earn back your trust, even when we didn't deserve it. I look around the garden full of people who genuinely love me, and think about the contrast with my 67th birthday, when I was completely alone. Michael, I tell him, do you know what was the hardest part of all this? What? It wasn't discovering that my children wanted to rob me. It was realizing that for years I had accepted crumbs of love when I deserved a complete banquet. And now I have the complete banquet. That night, after everyone left, I stayed alone in my house reading the letters I had received from senior adults across the country who had read my story online. Hundreds of people wrote to tell me their own experiences, to thank me for giving them courage to defend themselves, or simply to tell me they weren't alone. One letter in particular caught my attention. It was from a 75-year-old woman named Anne. Dear Helen, I read your story and cried for hours. Not from sadness, but from relief. For 5 years I've been allowing my son and daughter-in-law to treat me like a burden, accepting 5-minute visits where they barely talk to me, feeling like I should be grateful for any attention they give me. Your story made me realize that love shouldn't hurt so much, that respect isn't too much to ask for, that I have the right to be treated with dignity. Tomorrow I'm going to call my son and tell him that if he wants to have a relationship with me, it's going to have to be a real relationship. Not these superficial encounters where they make me feel like I'm an obligation. Thank you for teaching me that it's never too late to start valuing yourself. With admiration. And those letters confirmed something I had suspected. My story wasn't unique. There were thousands of senior adults living versions of my nightmare, accepting disrespectful treatment from their families, because they believed it was better than being alone. But I had learned that being alone was better than being in bad company. And more importantly, I had learned that alone and without biological family weren't the same thing. I put away the letters and went out to the garden, where Robert and I had planted a rose bush 20 years ago. The roses were blooming, beautiful and resilient. Robert, I told the wind, I think I finally understood what you told me before you died. The kids were too busy with their own lives to be true family. But I found a new family, a family that chose me as much as I chose them. The wind moved the roses, and for a moment, I felt as if Robert were there with me, proud of the woman I had become. The next day I received an unexpected call. It was Charles. Mom, he said, and his voice sounded different. More humble, more tired. Charles, I just read all the letters you've been receiving. Maria showed me some. Yes. Mom, I think I finally understand what we did. Oh really? We didn't just hurt you. We hurt hundreds of other people who read our story and saw themselves reflected in it. And I realized I can't live with that. I can't live knowing I contributed to a culture where senior adults are treated like burdens instead of human beings with rights. Charles, what do you want? I want to apologize. Really apologize. Not because I want something from you, but because I need you to know that I finally understood how terrible we were. And what are you going to do with that understanding? I don't know, but I want to start by donating to your foundation and working to repair the damage I caused. And our relationship, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect you to include me in your will. I don't expect anything. I just want you to know that I became a better person by seeing the consequences of my actions. It was the most honest conversation I had had with Charles in decades. Charles, I told him, forgiveness isn't something you give because the other person deserves it. It's something you give because you need to free yourself from the weight of anger. Does that mean you forgive me? It means I'm going to work on forgiving you. But trust is something different. That has to be earned. I understand. Do you really? Yes. And I'm willing to work to earn it for the rest of my life, without guarantees of success. I hung up the phone feeling strangely at peace. I didn't know if Charles had really changed, or if this was another manipulation. But there was something different in his voice, something that sounded like genuine repentance instead of self-pity. Time would tell, but what I did know was that I no longer needed my children to love me to be happy. I no longer needed their approval to feel valuable. I no longer needed their presence to feel complete. I had learned the most important lesson of my life. Self-love isn't selfish. It's essential, and I had learned that sometimes, to save a relationship, you first have to be willing to lose it. In the end, the fine print of my life wasn't in legal documents. It was in the small daily actions that showed me who really loved me and who simply tolerated me. And now I knew how to read that fine print perfectly. The end. The Helen Martinez Foundation for the Protection of Senior Adults continues to operate successfully, having helped more than 1,000 families navigate situations of financial and emotional abuse. Helen Martinez, now 70 years old, continues to be its active president and a tireless advocate for seniors' rights. Her story has been adapted into documentaries and books, and continues to inspire people of all ages to value themselves enough to demand respect in all their relationships. Michael Martinez maintains a close relationship with his mother, and has established a program at his hospital to educate medical staff about signs of elder abuse. Patricia Martinez visits her mother regularly, and has begun taking pro bono cases for senior adults who are victims of family fraud. Charles Martinez eventually apologized publicly, and now donates annually to the foundation, although his relationship with his mother remains limited by mutual choice. Helen Martinez's story continues to be a reminder that it's never too late to start valuing yourself, and that true family love is based on mutual respect, not biological obligation.